my name's Stanley, and I'm mad as hell. And I'm mad about almost everything that's happening in the world and to my community right now, but I like to channel that, instead of wallowing in on my own self-pity, into things that are mostly inconsequential. And today, that's going to be world building. And shout out to the John Boyce video I stole this screen cap from, which is a very good video and also has one of the greatest graphs ever made by anyone. But this is not about John Boyce. This is about world building. And the first question is of what world building actually is. And it's one of those where you'll know it if you see it kind of things. It's where you're developing a fictional world, and it's usually in service to a story, a piece of media, and you'll be there developing things like ecosystems, cultures, worlds. And the next question is then, how do we do that? So if we then go on Google and let's see what kind of guides that we can get to learn how to world build. So here, this first one here says, describe your world, set out the things, and then it says to make a map. This one points you to this, which I have I have great faith in this being a good resource, which also recommends you to make a map. Here's another one that says that you should make a map, and then there's another one which recommends you make a map, and then there's this other one which recommends that you make a map, and then this other one, and I'm going to stop here because the rest of them are just AI summaries of these, and they're trying to sell you map-making software, and they're all terrible. So we have a problem. And this problem here is that there seems to only be one way to world build, and it looks like literally nobody on the planet has written about any other method ever. So, this is a problem faced by a lot of people who are trying to get into world building as a thing, independent of anything else, right? And because world building is often seen as this tool, it's something in service to something, and less of an art in itself. And there's this real belief that it's only one way to do it. Those green screenshots are pretty much the example of that. And because, like I say, it's a tool, it's a thing of you must do these things, right? You must create a map, right? You must create a solar system for your single planets. You must create a constructed language. You must produce maps of all the tectonic plates and Köppen climate maps, because if you don't do that, you're not doing world building, you idiots. And it means that any other way of doing things kind of just gets slipped under the rug, and obviously the SEO doesn't hit. So, if you're seeing every single source saying these same things, obviously you're kind of inclined to believe that, right? And you know what? Give me 1 second. I'm just going to stop this rotating on me because then I'll completely lose where my notes are. So, that's not where I am. Awesome. So, I had this world that I've been creating for a while, and I believe that this is the only way that you could really do things with world building. But after a while, I managed to break out of that mold and then started to figure out what I wanted to do with it, and shocker, do things that I actually liked. And I've also been wrestling with something for a while with this approach to how you do things. I don't necessarily just mean like, I don't like making maps, which I don't. But it's more or less the process and the reason that we go about world building that I had an issue with. So if you do have a world building project, one of the things you're actively encouraged to do is this. Make a wiki. And a big compendium that tells you everything. Like, you go in here and you will find out absolutely every single thing about this world. Like, you want to find out about a town, like, here's its full history on display. If you want to learn about a character, here's the full DSM-5 diagnosis. Here's all of the ontologically good and ontologically bad characters, because that's something that's definitely not a very concerning thing to have in a project. And I'm not a fan of that, right? Beyond the maps, beyond all of this shite on here, everything wants you to lay out all of your information just publicly, readily digested, like a fan wiki, And I don't really like that. And the reason why I don't like that is that I feel that we're neglecting world building as an art by taking this approach. And then there's the other side to this as well. For people who then see this wiki method to world building, they then take world building as something that it's flavorless. There's nothing else to do here. It's something that just serves a story and nothing else. There's no value beyond the plot. Like, it's just something that should only ever be seen by the author and then no one else. And to underscore a little bit here that I'm someone who has quite strong opinions and maybe take some certain things I think with a grain of salt, this paragraph made me think many different things about who wrote this and what they're trying to sell you, with an affiliate link right after this. So, what else can we do? I believed, and I still believe, that world building itself has great potential to create these incredibly engaging experiences. How you can make the player effectively feel like they're a mini historian, like they're as much a part of the world and trying to figure it out almost as much as you are. So, I had this world that I mentioned before. I've been developing it for a while, I've been writing it, I've been rewriting it, and then I got to the point where I really wanted to bring some part of it out into the public, or I would go insane. So the result was this game, Shaman the Outsider and the Diet of Worms. And I say game, but it's more of a game-like. It's these in-universe materials where we have this book here, which is a autobiography of an anthropologist going to a remote village, and it comes with the actual book scanned, and in universe is scanned is a file, and it also comes with what is in effect the in-universe version of Wikipedia page made 400 years after the book was published. And it comes with an edit history, you can see comments and that kind of thing. And I liked it. Other people liked it, and it won an award at Neuroscope, which I'm still quite proud of. And there's no real goal or end state to this. There's no wahoo, you've accumulated enough your knowledge, yay. It's really just up to you as the player to decide, yeah, I've had enough, or when you're talking with people or trying to puzzle out exactly what happened to the author, that kind of thing. But this whole game was basically a trial run for this approach to world building that I mentioned earlier. And if it didn't work, I'd just forget this happened and go live under a bridge or something. But it did work. And it worked enough to win an award, which I'll keep mentioning because I won an award. So, here's what I've done. I have this giant obsidian vault that is effectively a wiki. And everything I write in here is 100% completely and objectively true. So it has all of the characters, their exact birth dates, when they're going to die, the rise and fall of specific empires, exactly the founding dates of specific cities. And the important bit, nobody else is going to see this besides me. So if you do want to engage with this world and find out about it, you have to do it through in-universe materials, like that wiki and the autobiography I mentioned before. And no one will see this. So if you want to find out, say, when there was a date of a specific battle, you have to learn it through those in-universe materials. And you have to engage it through the lens of whoever in-universe produced those materials. What kind of biases do they have? Why do they make the material? And you have to puzzle that together with possibly other material that is also out about this world. And this is pretty simple as an idea. I'm hardly the first one who's done it. But I specifically want to show how this, I feel, is a very, very powerful way to go about world building, and how you can use this to make world building itself as a means to narrative. So, first off, we now have a world where none of the materials are truly objective, right? And there's no way to know if something is truly telling the truth. Truly. You have to rely entirely on your own critical eye, you have to consider sources, you have to consider context, and the best part, I'm not telling you which one is the best one or the least biased. You have to figure that out yourself. So in short, I'm making the player do all of the work. And players find this fun. So, with this method, we effectively split ourselves into two different spaces. So we have the truth over here, and we have player space. The truth is this objective, true, 100%, this is what happened space, that wiki, effectively. And then the player space is the in-universe published materials and what everyone else can see and then engage with. And these things that you publish, they can be things like in-universe textbooks, they can be fictional novels, web pages, blog posts, songs, podcasts, photographs, paintings, anything that exists in universe. So to demonstrate this a little bit further, let's do a basic example. So we have this character, and this character dies, got drunk, fell into a canal, no foul play. So if we just publish that, that's a bit shit. So let's start with how we can then introduce this to our players. Maybe we should do it through a police report. And just already, this in itself is implying so much about this world already. Like the fact that it's a police report, the police exist. They make reports on the stuff they do. Police reports are public. Or are they public? Well, maybe we're letting the player access this through the eyes as if they were part of the police. But that's all for a little bit later. Just something to keep in mind. So let's just focus on this for now. So let's say that this police report is inconclusive. They're not sure if the character died, if there was foul play involved, if they were murdered or something similar. Maybe someone relates to this character releases a book. They get a book deal and they've made a whole autobiography of their relationship with this character. And related to the police report, maybe this might shine some new light, might get us a bit closer to what happened here. And now let's throw a spanner in the works. Someone claims they did the murder. And obviously, from our perspective, this is ridiculous because we know exactly what happened. But keep in mind, this is what the player is seeing. They have no way to know who is saying the truth here right off the bat. They have to try to figure it out just between the relationship between what's out there already. So, we have this, and then let's say someone goes, hey, they weren't murdered. But equally, the player isn't sure, they're going to have to cross-reference and try to figure out which of these is the truth. And there might really be no way to figure out the truth. It may just be ways that you try and connect these things or like discuss the theories with people. And that's fine, right? The important thing here is that all of these sources contain aspects or sometimes just reflections of the truth. This one could just be that they read the police report and thought, this will be a great laugh. This one could be that they might have a lot of bad blood with the character. Who knows? So we have to consider all of these, and all these sources are colored by each of the person who's publishing it, and possibly the institution who's publishing it. Have to consider their perspectives, the context of why they'd want to publish this, the personal vendettas, and so on. And because of these connections, people are inclined to then try to figure out what's going on and why, right? Now, in this case, it's a little bit of a cheating case, because if we just say murder mystery, that you're going to get people inclined to figure out what's going on. But we don't have to go to these extremes. You can apply this idea to any sort of source in the truth. For instance, if you want to have, like, what kind of cuisine is available on a remote island? What kind of jacket a historical figure wears? You can go pretty much anything and just do it through published in-universe texts. And players, they'll create theories, they'll discuss with each other, they'll map out events, they'll cross-reference stuff. And because you're always going back to the thing that is grounded in some kind of truth, or you're building off stuff that already exists, they always are threads that they can pull on, and they can start to piece together their own theories around it. And like I say, it doesn't matter if this can't be solved. Because we've given them that truth to latch onto, they're going to want to dig in, and we've effectively said that, hey, there might be a truth here. And they'll just like tie themselves into knots trying to find it. It's easy, it's very easy to do. So not only can you make a world more engaging for the player, you can also make it a more entertaining process for you as the author. This method, mostly by accident, actually lets you as the author play into mistakes that you might make as you're creating stuff. And instead of immediately needing to resort to retcons or trying to redact things in your world, you can actually play into them. And it means that your world starts to evolve a bit like actual history does. So, let's do an example. Here we have a date for a historical battle, and we'd like to tell people about it. So you then publish an in-universe textbook, and pretty simple, not much more to say here. But then, oops, some revisions have happened, and for whatever reason, your date for this historical battle has now changed, and it just works much better if it now takes place on this date. And obviously, the problem is, there's now a discrepancy here. So what can we do to fix this? So an easy one is, let's make a new publication. And then the question is, what should this be? So one of the easiest ones, we could just make a second edition of this. Now, the question is, why is there a second edition? So maybe there's been some new discoveries for everyone. They sincerely believe that that was the real day, and that's what all the data said, so why wouldn't they just make a second edition? Maybe this date had some mythic or national significance. Maybe there's some kind of, if I read my notes, maybe there's controversy over this, and maybe it speaks to the publisher's political leanings, the fact that they're agreeing that this is now the new date. Maybe it was the print error. And maybe this was a big issue, but is it a big issue? Is it a small issue? And then how does the publisher itself react to this? How do they react to how they should fix this mistake? Then is there a thing of the author also being at fault? Or is the publisher more of a monolith and people are just getting mad at that? Maybe it's a layman that then is the one who reports on this. And maybe this is a case of a conspiracy theory and nobody else believes them. Maybe it's a case of the source itself, this publisher, they're notoriously unreliable. Because obviously the publisher themselves isn't going to say, by the way, don't trust anything we say in their own book. So look how much we can do and that we can develop just from this. That this is just from us changing a date over. And you might be looking at this and going like, well, we're doing a lot of things in this world. This is like a lot of work. We just want to change the date. So you could do nothing. This might just be the incorrect date that everyone knows about, like just until the end of time. The player may never know. And there's a question of like, well, is it a problem that they don't know that day? And it might not be. Because you can imagine how many things do we have in our history that we might have slightly wrong dates on. World still turns. I still have to pay rent, annoyingly. So very interesting though, from the author perspective, there's suddenly now no longer this need or this perfectionism, if you like. My world has to be absolutely perfect before I can put out anything because I need to figure out 500 ways that these people like do interpretive dance or whatever. Because you can just put it out and then if you need to retcon or you need to adjust something, there's many ways that you can build around that. And in the end, it often makes your world stronger and more interesting as a result. So here's an example from a player perspective. So cool. One of my favorite projects is just put out a new thing, learning about this battle, learning about different things that happened in this war. And then, oh dear, blog post has come out in the universe. So, well, do we trust this blog post? Well, it's made by historians, so maybe we should. Okay, now this is getting a little bit of traction now. This blog is cited. Can we trust a newspaper? It's picking up a little bit of steam now. Looks like this publisher's had a bit of a history of doing this, and it looks like this isn't a one-off incident, and now it's really starting to meet its apex, and they've started to apologize for this issue, and now we have the second edition of the book, but it looks like there's this ongoing boycott of this publisher all going on. We don't even need to see the full text of these. Like, we can already connect the dots of what's happening and the implications of why people reacted in this way, why the publisher responded this way. We've now turned world building itself into a form of story, just through publishing all of these little bits and pieces. And all of these intertextually then are telling us more about the world. And again, we haven't directly stated everything. Like this is telling us how information is usually disseminated, who distributes that information, what kind of biases, what kind of groups they look over, who are the ones keeping them in check, how much influence do those groups keeping them in check have, how do people respond when they lose trust in institutions. All of that we've managed to build just from not being decisive over a date. And I think it's made a better world. So adding on to this idea that I mentioned of you no longer having that anxiety of needing to wait and you can just get out there, you can start producing. This process, in effect, encourages you to make more because the more you make, the more it backports effectively into world building. And this is a pretty simple idea, but it has a lot of weight behind it. It's that everything implies everything. And I mean absolutely everything. Like you could pick just one thing in this room and you could do a thesis level study about how it's a simulacrum of humanity, the planet, society, everything, right? Like why is this TV a rectangle? Why do these walls have these, like, I don't know what they're called actually, but why do these walls have these patterns on them, right? Why do I look like Dracula's gay cousin? Many questions. And for the example, this is a passage from Diet of Worms, and let's get into everything that this might imply from this one paragraph. And in other words, subtext. It's powerful. And as mentioned briefly before, the format that this book is in also implies so much about the world as well, right? So in Universe, this is a digital scan of a book, and that is then shared between university students over email. So just from that, we now know that books are a common way to share complex topics. We now know that digital scans are something good. They have scanning equipment. Universities exist. People share around materials. There doesn't seem to be any like stigma, or maybe there is rules, but there doesn't seem to be any like major crackdowns on them sharing materials. Maybe copyright isn't a thing in this world. All of these things we're starting to imply just from how in universe we're receiving these materials. So all of this, in effect, is stress testing the world and putting it into actual motion, right? And you can theory craft, you can like trundle around in the wiki all you want, but none of that really matters until you actually put things into practice and start realizing how things all connect together. And not only that, by forcing you to go through something like this and consider, like, for example, how one day in a village works for the average person, it means that you'll be touching on things that you wouldn't really have thought of otherwise. So there's things in here, and I'm looking at this now and I'm like, well, are the things that was I thinking about when I went into writing Diet of Worms? Yes, particularly the stuff on gender. I was thinking about quite a lot while I was going into it, but there's also parts in here that kind of just came up as I was writing it. And I was like, yeah, this feels correct for the writer. This feels correct for the culture that they come from. And this is what I truly mean here by world building through negative space, right? All of these implications, intentional or not, this becomes the world building, right? It's not the wiki, it's what's happening here. It's what people are engaging with. It's how people are interpreting the world that they actually live in. And there's many things in a full text that I never would have considered, right? And because of that, I can now take things from here that I didn't consider before, bring them back into the wiki, and now suddenly I have like 101 new springboards to bounce off and make new material. But none of that would have happened if I didn't write the book in the first place. If I stayed in that wiki, I would have just been going in circles around the fact that they like to eat worms, which wouldn't have been that interesting. So similarly to this idea of how everything can imply everything, this approach goes against the idea of culture as a monolith. And if you've heard of the Planet of Hats tropes, this is quite a nice way that you can start working around this. There's this desire when you're building a culture to just say that X society believes Y because... And that's not really how cultures work, because it might be surprising, but individual people have individual thoughts. That includes China, which I know people have a lot of trouble understanding. So, with the public wiki approach, you pretty much get this saying, like that's related to what I've just said. So, let's start with an example point on religion. Pretty basic point. And let's start with this. So, we can say that this is like an epic, a poem, a myth, or whatever, some kind of starting point. Maybe someone gets a bit creative, and then we have a nice little song about how cool the moon is. But I want to throw a spanner into the works. Let's do this. So an easy way to go against what the culture is doing is just doing a direct counter to it. But maybe someone is trying to have some friendly dialogue. Maybe they're trying to reconcile their own faith and try to figure out their own beliefs in these two gods. And maybe someone then expounds on that a little bit further. And then maybe a little bit further. And then maybe they're going to the other extremes of this. And what we're really doing here is we're starting to drift more and more away from that first point of there being two gods. And the reason why we're able to drift from that and we're able to be a bit more fluid with this is that we never objectively stated this is what this culture believes in. And it gives us that leeway to mess around with it. And of course, we can just say that one thing just immediately dominates everything else, and that is now the idea that most people believe in. But it doesn't suddenly mean that these ideas aren't still around. They might still be in dialogue. They might be influencing the church. And an important thing to note when you have a dominant idea, or particularly a dogma in this case, when there's a prohibition, it means that that something does exist. Right? You wouldn't be restricting a behavior if people weren't doing that behavior in the first place. So, and also, it's perfectly fine if you start off like constructing and building up this church like from that note to begin with. But it's then you then have to think of how the church is put together, how it's constructed. Why was the church built? How did they get to the point that they are? Who's the one who's publishing the materials that the church is publishing? Is it one guy? Is it more of like a cult around one specific person? Is that person elected? Are they kind of like forcefully a dictator? Do they try to be faceless? Like what's the interaction that they have with religion in this world? And then there's a case of how do the people actually interact with the church on a day-to-day basis? Like, do they sincerely believe everything here, or is it a case of... Ooh, we good? Awesome. Cool, awesome. Is it a case of the people believe in the church because they're quite friendly with it, or is it a case of they're just saying that they're part of the church for community or for reasons of persecution? When in reality, this is what's happening on the ground. Really, that's up to you to decide. And thus, my evangelism comes to an end. I truly believe that one of the best ways to world build is through this method of world building through negative space. And I think that world building is an art, we can treat it better, we can use it as a narrative tool, and yeah, I hope me going on and nearly going over time prove that to you. So, to conclude, world building is storytelling, and if you don't believe me, get off Reddit. Thank you.